Welcome each and every one of you to this very important conversation about breaking the double glass ceiling when it comes to race, gender, and corporate boards. We have awesome panelists today. We have an amazing moderator. Really excited to hand over the stage and get this conversation going. However, before that happens, I do just want to say a brief word about the fourth effect. For those of you that don't know, and many of you might already know, but we are a new kind of community-driven board and investment marketplace for startups and growth stage companies that are seeking mentors, advisors, experts, and funders, including angels, and for women who want to break into the board candidate pipeline and/or invest. Founders, if you are listening and you are not part of the fourth effect, or you're not inside our platform with premium access, please consider joining us so that you can tap into this incredible talent pool, like some of the amazing women who you will hear from today in this discussion, and also seek funding in our back room. So we really invite you to do that. If you're unsure how, please come to a platform tour. We do them Mondays and Thursdays from 12 p.m. to 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They unofficially go on for an hour, so we can help you onboard and get going. And then executives, if you're listening to this and you are interested in advancing a for-profit board career and/or investing, please consider joining us. One way to think about the fourth effect is if LinkedIn and Bumble had a baby and then you fed that baby a lot of AI, that's a lot of what we're going for at the fourth effect. So, please join us so we can be the only network that you need to land that first advisory board seat, that first governing board seat, and start investing. Okay, so that's about us. And then, so we'll share the link to the platform tour. And, this is for founders, but this is also for executives, investors, for anyone who wants to get involved. We do have a board bootcamp coming up on April 10th. We'll share a link to board bootcamp as well. There is also an in-person one, April 16th. So if you're in the New York area, you can let us know and we'll make sure to send you the information. And then the last thing I want to say about the fourth fact is it's Women's History Month. So it's still March and we run a promotion 50% off all of the premium memberships this month. So if you've not joined us yet and you're considering it, now is a really great time to do that. So we hope that you will. But let's get to the point of today. We could not be more excited for this very important conversation with our panelists who are doing amazing things in the world, including breaking the double glass ceiling. We have an incredible moderator, Lanchi Venator. She is currently a member of the KFC Global Leadership Team as the Chief Financial and Strategy Officer responsible for driving growth and profitability of the KFC business. Previously, she was SVP of Global Finance and Strategy and Chief of Staff to the EVP and CFO of the Estee Lauder companies, Estee Lauder companies. So with that, Lanchi, I would love to welcome you to the spotlight to properly introduce yourself and then also introduce your panelists.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you I wanted to start thanking you, Breen, actually, and Kat, for creating this forum and giving us this moment to come together to talk about this very important topic. Very much looking forward to it. Some of you, if you were on LinkedIn, you probably saw that we got excited just prepping for it. And so hopefully some of the exciting topics that we had during prep will surface and it'll generate some ideas and be thought-provoking. So just the format, I will rather than not do justice to everybody, all of our esteemed panelists' background, we'll do a round of introductions. And then we do have some prepared questions that I will kick off. And then, of course, we're very much open and hoping that the audience will have questions that you can submit to us in the chat box. Okay, so very quickly, Breen, thank you for just going through my resume. I had like a 30-second update. I actually spent the first third of my career in Asia doing marketing and distribution. My first job was actually in market research. So at the core of me, I'm a market researcher. I love consumers, consumer products, all things related to how to service the consumer. And then the next 2/3 of my career to date, I've been here in New York City. So I'm calling from New York City. For anybody who's in New York, I went to grad school here, and then I did consulting also focused on consumer products. And then I went to American Express, and then I was at Avon, and then as Breen said, I was at Estee Lauder company. So I spent a good 15 years in beauty. And then I got a call to be the CFO of KFC, a couple of wild moves. One was it's not based in New York, but it's actually based in Texas. And then the second is I left the beauty company. But regardless, it's a great brand. It's part of the Yum family of brands that many of you might know: Taco Bell, Pizza Hut. And if you're in the California area, we also have Habit Burger for those who like burger. So very much excited. I am going to maybe hand it over to maybe Trisha, if you don't mind. We'll just do a round of introductions, and then I'll kick off with the very first question. So I'm going to invite Trisha to introduce herself with the California Connect.
Thank you. Thank you, Lanchi. And thank you to the Fourth Effect. I am delighted to be here. And as Lanchi said, we got super excited with just the prep. It's such a great conversation. So a little bit about me. I have spent over 25 years as a in-house corporate securities attorney. I started my career at a large national law firm called Brobeck, Flager and Harrison back in the mid-90s. And then went in-house from there. I've worked with companies big and small, from startup stage to large multinational global corporations. My last operational role was as general counsel and head of DEI at a company called Looker, which was a data analytics SaaS software company, which we sold to Google in 2020 for $2.6 billion, Google's fourth largest acquisition. From there, I decided to pivot my career and sought a seat in the boardroom. And I landed my first board seat at a company called Salsify, which is a late-stage SaaS company in the e-commerce platform space. I'm the chair of the compensation committee and a member of the audit committee there. I also invest in female and underrepresented founders. And I'm an author of a new book called Embrace the Power of You: Owning Your Identity at Work. And on the personal side, I'm a first-generation Latina, born in Los Angeles to two immigrants. My mother is from El Salvador, my father's from Ecuador. So I hope to bring some of that perspective into the conversation today. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so over to Shelley.
And of course, I was muted. Hi, everyone, and thank you to Fourth Effect for doing this. You're absolutely right. The prep itself was fun, so I'm sure the panel is going to be really helpful. So thank you. I spent 35 years on Wall Street at major firms. I was at Chase before it merged with JP Morgan and became JP Morgan Chase. I was at Barclays, et cetera. And my specialty has been, for most of my career, investing in turnaround situations. So I worked on what's called the buy side, where I ran what we'll call prop trading desks at Barclays and other places. And then I also worked on the sell side. I was a junk bond and a stress bond analyst who covered the auto industry when GM went bankrupt. And that got me, that landed me on CNBC a couple of times, et cetera. But it was a really stressful job trying to combine that with kids. So after that job ended, I used to say I stumbled into board work, but it was a result of a long-term relationship. A family office, a wealthy family that I had worked with on different investments, had a stake in a company. They asked me if I would like to be on the board. I didn't know anything about board work, but I was at least savvy enough to say, yeah, I'll do that. And that kind of led to 6 different board roles. I'm on 2 boards now. I was on the board of Bed Bath & Beyond. My turnaround background, that kind of board made sense for me. We couldn't save it, but it was an interesting experience. So I do board work now. And then I also have launched a startup called Schmooze, which is, it helps women and encourages women to build business relationships. My view is relationships close gaps between where you are in your career and where you want to be. And so that's the goal of Schmooze. And then, like Trisha, I do a little bit of investing. I'm a limited partner in a fund that backs startups in the consumer space.
Great. Okay. And then our last panelist, there she is, Mary.
Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here with my fellow panelists and Lanchi. Thank you to the Fourth Effect. I am a lawyer by background. I worked with securities litigation and securities class actions and SEC investigations. I worked in-house at Tyco if any of you remember the big corporate scandal, I was in charge of all those corporate governance matters when our former CEO and CFO were imprisoned. So I've done that. I've also worked in government a lot. I have worked in the White House and in senior levels at the Department of Justice. And I also am Native American, and I've had the opportunity to be CEO of a national healthcare organization, the Indian Health Service, that provides healthcare to over 2 million Native Americans around the country. I also am a first generation, not only law school graduate, but college graduate. Neither of my parents went to college. My dad did not even graduate high school. I am on 3 boards right now, which I'm sure you'll all hear more about. I'm on a public company board. I'm on 2 private boards, one of which is PE backed. So one's just a kind of mutual private company and the other one's PE backed. And then I also have a foundation named after my mother and grandmother, the Caroline and Ora Smith Foundation, to train Native American girls in STEM, because I do have a STEM background before I went to law school. My undergraduate major was in math and computer science, and I worked as a systems programmer at Walgreens corporate headquarters before I went to law school.
Okay, I mean, we could be here for days asking you guys about your background. What an amazing and diverse background. And so I'm going to try to be very focused. By the way, I don't plan on going to jail as a CFO, but Mary, I know if that comes to be. So we are very focused on boards and the journey that you took, and all of the speed bumps and the challenges. So I'm going to kick off the questions that we prepared for Mary. And the first question is, and I will ask everybody this, what challenges did you encounter when you were looking for boards to join? And, basically, how did you address that? How do you address them? How did you eliminate those challenges?
Well, maybe unlike Shelley, I very intentionally wanted to be on boards. And in fact, about 15 or so years ago, I was starting to get interested in it. But then I went in government, and you can't do that while you're in government. But in retrospect, I realized I probably wasn't ready. But I think it's good to develop an interest before you're ready, so you can develop the skills. After I left the Indian Health Service, I actually treated trying to get on boards like a full-time job. And I spent 3 years doing that very intentionally, spending a lot of time. And to me, I think there's the challenges or hurdles to getting on boards are probably both internal and external. At least they were for me. The internal one was, I know I was a lawyer, but I was the CEO of the Indian Health Service, but I think it was trying to create my narrative that I could be a board member. I think unless you're a CEO, for maybe many people, unless you're CEO or CFO, you have to create your narrative about what value, what you're bringing to a board. And maybe some people are able to do that in a day. To me, it was an evolution over, a few months, just feeling confident in my narrative and what my value was. And then the second and third things. The second things are, there are very specific things you need to have ready if you want to be on boards. One is your board bio, which is different than a resume. Also, this relates to your internal narrative, but your elevator pitch, if you're speaking to someone about what value you're going to bring to a board, you need to have a succinct little pitch about why you. And thirdly, I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about it during this conversation, is I found that you need networking certainly to get on boards. And I think that'll be a common theme throughout this webinar. But sometimes I know, at least for myself, I had to create like the part of the network. I maybe had some people who would help me on boards, but I was dealing with lawyers a lot, and lawyers can help you certainly, but I don't think they're the core group that will help you get on board. So I had to broaden out who I network with beyond my comfort zone of lawyers. So I think those are some of the challenges.
Great. When I was prepping with Mary, I know one thing you said, which I resonate, and I don't know if the group feels this way too. It's easy to say to network, but sometimes when you don't have that network, and just getting the network is a hard process in itself. And so it sounds to me like you can do it. I mean, you got there. That's a good encouragement. I'm going to shift over to Shelley because you also touched on network during our prep as well as during our intro. Tell us a little bit about what challenges did you encounter when you were looking forwards, and then how your network helped you address those challenges or eliminate or anything else that you leveraged.
Okay, you're asking me, was that me for me, Lanchi? Yeah, so despite the fact that this family office who had an equity stake in this company suggested me as a board member, I still had to go through the interview process. And so I interviewed probably with maybe two boards that they had equity stakes in before one it decided to appoint me as a board member. And the main hurdle that I had was that I didn't have any experience. So I think if you're a CEO, and how many women are CEOs, but if you're a CEO or CFO, then the path is a little bit straighter. But, I was from this very weird specialty on Wall Street, which was, distressed and turnaround investing. But that's one reason why I was so excited about the Fourth Effect, because they focus a lot on advisory boards. And so if you've been on an advisory board, you can use that as a pathway to a private company board, a governance board, or public company board, because at least then you can say, I'm familiar with the board role. I understand what boards do. Advisory boards are different from governance boards, but still it's kind of one of those hurdles. And so Fourth Effect allows you to build that portfolio of experience, which I didn't have. I finally landed that first board role, and because of relationships, that has led to every other board role I've gotten has been through a relationship. But the big hurdle for me was experience, and them people not being able to see what I brought to the table. So as you mentioned, your elevator pitch, Mary, very important.
Great, thank you. And over to you, Tricia. So same question. What were your challenges?
Yeah, I think my path was similar to Mary's in the sense that I had actually was very intentional as well about getting a board seat. When I closed the acquisition with Google, I realized I got data that showed that less than, I think it's 2% of board seats go to Latinas. And I just thought that is a statistic that needs to change, and that I had the experience to be on a board. So I spent more than a year just really treating it also like a full-time job of finding out and getting myself prepared. And I will say I learned a couple of things along the way. While I thought that maybe gender or race might be a hurdle, in fact, being a lawyer was a hurdle for me that I found, because a lot of the recruiters that I talked to would say, well, the board already has a general counsel, they already have outside counsel, they don't need another lawyer on their board. And so I also had to figure out how to reframe my background into something that is of value to boards. And as a general counsel or chief legal officer, you are lockstep with the CEO and CFO. And so you really have this broad view of the organization and have tackled the same questions. And so how to reframe from talking about just my legal experience to my broader operational experience took some time, and really nailing that board pitch, that board bio, and reframing it. It took some time. There were some opportunities that came up early that I didn't get, and I think it's because I didn't frame it the right way. So I think all of that prep is important. And as we're going to talk about more, again, the networking, really nurturing your network, years before you're thinking about a board seat, because that's where the relationships and where the board seats come from.
Great. I hope it's okay for my panelists, because I'm hearing this, and thematically, there's a couple of things. One is you have to have your narrative. Two is, sometimes you may not have that experience, but you have to build the experience. And then I think you've implied this, but three is you have to have the confidence in it as well. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can jump to another question that we prepped, which is this idea of an imposter syndrome. Sometimes, we have this voice in our brain, and it keeps us from saying all the things that we want to say and just highlight the experience that we have in a way that can get us that board seat. So I'm going to start this is another question for all of you, and we'll just go around, is, yes, there's a double glass ceiling. So is there also this double imposter syndrome that we have to overcome as we go for that board seat? And let me start with Shelley. Is it okay if I start with you?
Yeah, sure. So, I didn't acutely feel an imposter syndrome because the way I got on my first board was through, someone who knew me, then the board appointed me. And so it was a very comfortable start. But what I would say is what I have battled throughout my career is not being confident enough to take advantage of opportunities. So one of the things I talked about when we talked about our prep. Most of you are too young to remember Drexel Burnham Lambert, but I worked at Drexel many years ago. Drexel was the investment bank that Mike Milken, speaking of going to jail, Mike Milken went to jail for insider trading, Drexel disintegrated, etc. So I landed another job. Somebody who worked with me in that department, it was a very small department that I happened to be in, they landed at another bank working out problem loans. And that person had said to me, you want to look at it, distressed investing. Given your background, that'd be perfect for you. So they landed somewhere working out problem loans. And when they didn't get, I think the story went, the bonus that they wanted at the end of the year, what they decided to do was raise money and buy this problem loan portfolio from this bank. That was the start of this person becoming a billionaire, who is now a billionaire. For me, it would have never occurred to me to do that because I would have thought, oh, they didn't pay me what I wanted, I'm going to find another job. Now, granted, as a white male, I don't know if I would have been able to raise money. He was able to raise money. But the issue is, it never even occurred to me. So it's not so much imposter syndrome as it is not being, I don't know if the word is confident enough or being like bold enough to say, you know what? And so I've gotten better at that. So I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but it's more, I'm not stepping out of my lane. And so now at this advanced age, I've started stepping out of my lane. So I am definitely stepping out of my lane. I was on the board of something called a SPAC, and it was a tech SPAC. I don't know anything about SPACs, but I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do my own SPAC in the beauty industry. And so the SPAC market kind of fell apart before I could do it. But I guess it's kind of linked to imposter syndrome because I never would have thought of that for me. And this guy turned himself into a billionaire. And I probably was better at credit than he was. But because he didn't wrestle with that, and I just didn't even think about it. So I would encourage women to think about that in terms of how can I leverage this opportunity into something else.
Perfect. And Trisha, you also had a good story when we were prepping about this imposter syndrome and staying in a job that you possibly were not happy in.
Yeah, I would say I've battled, or I think it's managed imposter syndrome my entire career. I think, as a first generation professional, as a woman, as a Latina, I'm at the intersectionality of a lot of different identities. And so there's this inner struggle of not believing that I'm good enough, that I'm smart enough, that I have enough credentials, that I have, there's always this desire to get more, to try to prove that I deserve that seat. And I've struggled with that, climbing up the corporate ladder. Now, one thing I have learned about imposter syndrome is once you sort of reach something that you think is like that you've made it, it actually lessens, that voice sort of lessens. And so for me, getting to that general counsel seat, I didn't feel like I had imposter syndrome anymore because I was pretty confident in that role. But then pivoting to the board seat, I noticed as I was prepping for that first board meeting, that voice came back. Like, even though I went through extensive interview process, there was, obviously I earned that spot, but that voice came back. And so noticing, wow, I can't believe that it's still something that's just part of who I am. So I think part of the message is, for me to tell others that that voice is normalizing that voice for some people. Not everybody has it, but that it is something to contend with and have the tools to manage through it. But yeah, I think the story you referred to, Lanchi, was when I was thinking about being a general counsel, I didn't think I had quite enough experience. And I decided to, because I had 2 small kids at the time, to do a legal consulting business for a period of time. So I started my own business, which was actually quite successful. But in that business, I went and I helped and I assisted general counsels from companies of all sizes, very large global public companies. And I realized that not only could I do their job, but I could do it better. And so seeing them do their job and realizing that, wow, why am I holding myself back? Why am I not stepping in? Why I don't need more credentials. Part of it, and what Shelley was saying, was part of it was me not believing that I could to step into that role. And so, I think that's some of the work we need to do.
Great. And then when I was sharing with Mary, when we were prepping your story, she said, wait, I have a similar story. So I'm going to shift over to Mary and maybe talk about, how this phrase can apply to women sometimes more than men.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have had my years of insecurities, particularly when I was applying for boards, not thinking that I had the same skill set, thinking, oh, how can I compete with CEOs and things like that. But I guess I've been here listening to people and reading, and I get a little bit like insulted about using those terms, imposter syndrome, because I don't think we use those terms with men. And there's a famous little story or adage that gets said when applying for a job. If there's 10 criteria for the job, if men have only a few of them, they're like, yeah, I can do that job. And then women are like, no, I don't have the 10th one. I have these 9. I probably shouldn't apply. And I don't know what it is, but we do that. But I think it's probably because as women, I know there's some men on this call too, but we want to do a good job. And so I guess not that it's easy, and not that voice in my head doesn't say anything, but I try to use my insecurity as a strength. So I think usually I'll prepare even harder than maybe someone else, and sometimes that pays off. And then I guess the other thing is just perseverance, because I know all of us have kind of a theme, a running theme throughout their life. And one of the running themes in my life is I usually do not get something on the first try, sometimes not even on the second try. So I persevere and learn something each time. And it's usually because I didn't really understand what the process was or what was expected in the interview or whatnot. So I try to learn and just keep persevering.
Thank you. I think there's a follow-up question that's thematically what we're talking about here. And I'm with you. When I got interviewed for KFC, my first response to them was, I'm not a CFO. I don't have that skill set. And then when they went through my resume, they're like, but you are a CFO. And I have been a kick-ass CFO.
Yeah, not
So
surprised.
everybody needs to just try it for sure. So here's the question. It's from Sylvia, and it says, do you agree with the statement that you need to learn to command to be on a board? Because this is something that Sylvia's heard from a CEO talking to non-CEOs in the organization. This feels, I hope I'm reading this question right. It feels like, do you need to have that power? Do you always, do you already need to prove your command before you can be on the board? Hopefully that's your question. And then who would like to tackle this? Do you need that? I think I know what the answer is. Yeah. Yeah, Mary. Oh.
Yeah, well, I have a similar story. So I'm a president of the American Bar Association, and I was running against a white male for the presidency. And people told me that I didn't dominate a room, and that's what's needed. That, the thing about it is there's different kinds of leadership. And I think we can all think of people who do not dominate the room, but who listen very much. But when they speak, they don't speak a lot, but when they speak, they're very thoughtful and everyone pays attention. So I think that you bring your background to the board. You should be yourself, never be someone that you're not. But boards are very collaborative bodies. And I think that if anyone was trying to dominate the conversation, they wouldn't be probably a good board member, because it's a very collaborative environment. And the meetings have very packed agendas, and you need to address so many topics. So you weigh in when you have something to say. And if you don't have something to say, then you should listen.
Mhm. Great, thank you. Tricia, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I agree with Mary says. I think there are different styles of leadership, and I think there's a great book actually I'm reading right now called Quiet, and it talks about the power of introversion, and that the introverts have this quality of what Mary just said, of being very thoughtful and listeners, and that is an extremely powerful quality. And so I think there's this myth that you have to, as a leader, be an extrovert, be commanding, being whatever those words might be. And there's room for that, but if that's not who you are, that's not, if you're not showing up as who you are and where your strengths are, people will know. So I think there's a difference between commanding a room and having confidence in yourself. I think you can be a quiet, confident leader, and that's different from command, whatever that might mean.
Yeah, and I would agree with you guys. I mean, I think if anybody commanded the boardroom as a board member and they're not the chair, that to me is, I don't know how long you will be on the board. It's a very process, consensus, and you're there to act as a sounding board for management, to ask the right questions. One of the things I finally said in my pitch, was to say, look, I was the sell side analyst. I'm used to asking the, CEO of General Motors on the earnings call, what about this? What about that? And so I'm not there to command the room and force people to my way of thinking. I'm there to ask the right questions and kind of help management guide the company. So I'm surprised at that question from a CEO, because I would think they wouldn't want a board member who is kind of overbearing and commanded the room. So yeah, I would agree with the two of you.
Great. Okay, let me just shift back to Tricia. We're going to go back to the original order of the questions that we had prepped. Was there a pivotal moment in your career when you realized, wow, what got me here isn't going to get me there? And what was it? And how did this realization impact your career plans?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it earlier, but I think that as as a first generation Latina, my parents, and they told me, head down, work hard, don't rock the boat. And so that's what I did for most of my career, really head down. And I leaned into being a perfectionist. I was a people pleaser. And some of these things are helpful early in your career, actually doing things right and, doing them well and all of these things. But at some point in your career, to step into the next level of leadership, those sorts of traits kind of hold you back. And so I think that, in that moment when I was a consultant and I realized that I had all of the skill set and that I was holding myself back by, trying to be, have, as Mary said, the checklist of all the 10 things and having, making everybody happy and all of these traits, they were holding me back. And so I think that's when I realized that I needed to change my approach of how I was thinking about leadership.
Great. And Shelly, I have notes here that says you have a good golf story.
Oh, yeah. So I got recruited to come to Chase to help them start up the bank debt trading desk. I was like number 2 in command. I wanted that role. When I took the job, I said, I'm only taking the job if I get this. And my boss was great. He gave me, a lot of latitude. I was able to trade. I was able to do things that I had not done in my prior job. Well, lo and behold, we hired a trader from another bank who was going to trade. So my boss was the boss. I was kind of second command. And I look up one day, and this guy is not just schmoozing with us, because my boss wasn't really a guy's guy kind of guy, great guy, but didn't fit in with the whole slick Wall Street thing. And this guy who's a trader is over there talking to the other slick Wall Street types. And you know how guys do that thing where they like wiggle their hips like they're golf swinging, they're doing a golf swing, they're practicing their swing. So he's over there practicing his swing and they're talking about golf. And it dawned on me that you know, what got me there, which was my competence, my ability. That's why Bill, the boss who hired me was Bill. That's why Bill hired me, wasn't going to help me advance or, you know, get any kind of power or get things done, even inside the organization. But this guy, and he was very good at his job and a lovely person, but there was something that he was able to do that I didn't do. And I wasn't going to play golf because I had two small kids. I had a newborn and a 4-year-old. Who has time to go spend, you know, 4 hours learning to play golf? But I should have thought about other people, other ways to connect. And I kind of, just like I said, be more strategic and opportunistic. On one hand, I feel kind of bad by saying we need to change ourselves. You know, we talked about this during the prep, like the system is kind of unfair. It's structured by men, they run the whole thing. And so we need to do something to ourselves to make it work for us. But it's probably like nobody is coming to save us. So we talked about this. Like, if anything, you know, some people are trying to drown us, you know, when you look at Fearless Fund and what's happening with DEI, et cetera. So it's almost like, okay, well, what can I do until the system changes to make, you know, to pave a way for myself, for my daughters, et cetera. So I didn't figure out what to do in that instance about the golf playing guy who was kind of making inroads. And it turned out I left. He ended up pushing my boss out. So I don't know if I would have stayed anyway, but he definitely had the inside track and knew how, again, nice guy, very competent, but you know, he knew how to like make a place for himself and kind of climb to the top. And even now, you know, he talks about his interaction with the CEO of Chase. And it was like, how did he even get to be like talking to the CEO of Chase? Like, what is going on here? But, you know, he had something that I didn't have. And at that point, I knew what got me that job wasn't going to get me further because I needed something else to get me further.
Great, thank you. And I know, Mary, we didn't really talk about it, but I don't know if you have a story that you want to share, or we can go to the next question. And it's also
sure. Like, I guess similar to Trisha and Shelley, you know, I probably was a perfectionist as well. And I think it's true for all of us when we start our careers. It's not like you have a team of people working under you. So, you know, I learned at the entry level that, oh, if something needs to be done, I have to do it. And then as I got promoted and more senior, I still kind of had that mindset, and you cannot do that. And I know one boss, one GC that I worked for, he told me that you should be doing what's your highest and best use. But it took me mentally to try to let go of everything because, like, for instance, as a lawyer, if you're doing litigation as a junior person, you're writing the briefs. But the skill to review someone else's brief is slightly different, and it's a skill that you have to learn. So I definitely had to learn that too. And I know, similar to Shelley's golf story, I had a friend who I was asking to mentor me on my board journey, and she told me, I think it's kind of similar to Shelley's story, that her first board, she got an interview for an energy company, and she learned everything about the energy industry. She read everything about the company, the 10Ks, the Qs, everything. And then she didn't have an office at that time. So she asked a friend of hers who had a really nice office to use that office for her interview for the board seat. So the board member who's doing the interview comes in the office. He didn't ask her anything about the energy stuff, but he just was so impressed with the office. And then she ended up getting the board seat. So sometimes people are quirky. and you just never know it. But I think it's to Shelley's point, it's the connection. So he connected with that office.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
It's a great story. Actually, there's a few questions here. I'm just going to deviate a little bit. That's related to you know, what it takes to be on a board. So one from Julie: do you think that training, for example, Wharton, Harvard, and NACP, is required to secure a seat? And then maybe who would like to tackle that question? Then I have a follow-up question as well. Oh, Mary, perfect.
yeah, and I think she means NACD, but I guess what I would say in terms of the question, is it required? No, it's not required, because if you have the network, and like for Shelley's case, the people, they searched her out, they wanted her on the board. They already felt like she had the background to be on that board. I guess I have done a lot of those courses. I'm an NACD certified director. I've gone to a women's director program at Northwestern in Chicago, and I've gone to like the Stanford Directors College a couple years. And there's lots, there's at Harvard, Wharton, things like that. I guess for me, did it directly help me get on a board? I would say no. But what I guess it gave me is, back to our question about confidence. I think just being in those classes made me feel like I was better prepared. And if it can do that, then I think it serves a value.
Yeah.
And you do learn things, obviously, in those courses.
Perfect. And then maybe the follow-up question is, what skills and experience, and this one's from Sarah, what skills and experience do you need to join a private company board? And are there opportunities for communications and marketing executives? I don't know if Trisha or Shelley would like to tackle, or Mary.
You know what I would say, so I've always felt at a disadvantage. I'm on these calls and there are people who have marketing experience, or they were CTOs or CFOs, and I'm sitting here going like, what in the world? Why am I, you know, even thinking about how I should be on a board? But I think, you know, in terms of, look, I have a friend, we belong to an organization together for women on boards, and she's a communications person, and she just landed her first board role. So I think it really highly depends on the board. She's a communications and marketing person. She landed on a board outside of this country, but I'm sure she's going to leverage that position and those relationships she makes into other board roles. So it's possible. Look, if I could end up on a board, probably anybody can end up on a board, but I think it's possible. But that's going back to Mary's point, the very specific pitch, what's your value added. So it's not just enough to say I want to be on a board, it's what I can bring. And you know, again, not to just, you know, to praise a fourth effect, but they deserve it, because one of the reasons I think, you know, advisory boards are good, it helps you to establish yourself as an expert in an area. And so you can say, hey, I was on an advisory board of this, I was able to help those guys scale. So it helps translate your marketing skills, show that you translate your marketing skills to help not just the company that you work for, but somebody else figure out how to get to market. So go to market strategy or scaling strategy or whatever. So I think you probably have a situation like me where you're more of a specialist, but you know, Trisha and Mary said the same thing, being lawyers. So it's possible. You just kind of have to nail that value proposition in that elevator pitch.
Yeah, and I would agree with what Shelley's saying, and I would say, you know, absolutely, you can have a marketing background and be on a board. You just have to find the company that needs your experience and background. At Looker, one of the independent board members we got was the chief marketing officer, former chief marketing officer at Salesforce, and she was a phenomenal ad. We were looking to scale our marketing program and branding, and she brought in tremendous amount of experience to help us do that. And I would say, in particular, private companies are looking for that, you know, product market fit, that go-to-market execution, also your Rolodex. You know, they're looking to get into customers. And so there's, you know, huge opportunity there for, you know, for your experience, your network, to land a board seat. So absolutely.
Great, thank you. So I'm just doing a quick time check. I think we have one more questions that we can of our prep questions, and then I want to jump to the advice and resource part of our agenda. Okay, so this last question because we talked about diverse boards and how to join. The question is, at our gender and race intersection, we find ourselves to be the only one in the room many times, and I think the answer is going to be, is it true for you all? And how has this helped or hindered your career journey? And how did you leverage it to your benefit? So I'm going to start with Shelley, and then maybe go to Trisha, and then Mary.
So literally, I have an example where I was literally the only one in the room, and I have to say, on every board I've been on, I've been the only person of color or the only woman. So these men are not giving up these spots. Board spots are very attractive. You make money, you get contacts, you get equity. I was on the board with a guy, and that's all he's been doing. He retired early for the last 30 years, is being on boards. So he obviously is not interested in moving on. So so we're still a minority. I've been on one board where there was another woman of color, and she rolled off, and then I rolled on. So we overlapped a little bit. But so be prepared. It's the same thing that you go through in corporate America. So what I would say is, in addition to the training, which Mary is absolutely right, it's not going to help you land a board seat. But I think what I should have focused on more was developing those relationships with my other board members, because even if I'm the only person of color or the only woman in the room, those relationships are really important to get stuff done. So it's not so much commanding the room, but it's the stuff that goes on in committee, etc. So for example, I was on a board, I bonded with these two guys, I pinged them in January to say, hey, Happy New Year. They called me 3 weeks later to say, hey, here's a board role. Are you interested? And now I'm on that board. One last example, when Chase merged with Chemical, they had a meeting for all of the employees who were vice president and above. I was literally the only Black face in the room, the only Black woman. There were no Black men. But because of that, the head, the big honcho guy, knew who I was. So when I would walk into the elevator, he'd go, hi, Shelley. And I was like, but I was always too intimidated or to take advantage of that. I didn't know how to leverage that. Back to first generation, I'm the first generation in corporate America. Nobody told me, oh, so this is what you do. Now that Jimmy Lee, his name is Jimmy Lee, now that Jimmy Lee knows who you are, this is what you do. I just had no idea. So it can be, there's a little bit of advantage to it if you know what to do. And I've never known what to do. I'm getting a little bit better at it now, hence my latest board role with two guys, white males that I bonded with on a former board. But, that was one reason I started Schmooze, because I realized it's a really critical thing. And I would probably still be at JP Morgan if I had known how to bond with Jimmy Lee or to leverage that relationship and the fact that he knew me. So it was a little bit of advantage, but I just didn't know how to leverage it.
Great, thank you. And then Trisha.
Yeah, like Shelley, I've literally been the only Latina in the room my entire career, and oftentimes the only woman in the room. So it's a very lonely place to be. And if you don't have, family, network, friends, or mentors telling you, how to navigate the room, it's difficult. I had the advantage of, because I was a corporate lawyer, I sat in the boardroom for much of my career. So I had the opportunity to observe, what the board dynamics were like. So that I think helped me a little bit. But really leaning on others, mentors, is important. And I think, it's in, the reality is that most people that are in power are white men right now. And so they are they have the influence. And so they are someone you can learn from. And I think it's important for us to not shy away from building those relationships. They have influence, they have knowledge, they have connections. And I've had some incredible mentors that have been white men and have opened doors for me. So I think that it's important to foster those relationships as well. And I would say, a strength for me, I've hit every single ceiling and wall and, along the way. but it also has created for me a resilience. There is nothing that I can't tackle. There's nothing that's too hard, because I've had to overcome. And so I think that's a strength that many of us don't even realize that we have, because it's just sort of our DNA. And so I think, just recognizing that's a strength is good.
Thank you. And then Mary, before we go to our last question on resourcing and advice.
Yeah, I think similar to Shelley and Trisha. I am Native American, and to my knowledge, I'm one of only 2 Native American women in this country that are on a public board. There may be others, but
Wow.
not that I'm aware of. And so I think sometimes it's lonely. There's a lot of organizations like the Fourth Effect for Women, the Women Corporate Directors, and then there's, the Latino Corporate Directors Association and the Executive Leadership Council for Black Directors. I guess if I wanted to I'd have to start my own organization. But on the other hand, it's been helpful because I think I was recruited for one of my own boards because I have the background in tribal communities for healthcare. So just like the CEO knew Shelley because she stuck out, it can be helpful sometimes, but sometimes it's lonely. So you have to use what you're given, and everything. I think almost anything can be both a strength and a weakness.
Perfect. Okay. This has been amazing. I didn't think we'd get through all these questions. So last question for everybody, we'll just do a quick round robin, which is, what's the one piece of advice that you would like to share or leave with this group as they go on their own journey, and what's that thing that you want them to do tomorrow? And I can kick off. Maybe Trisha will take you first, and then Mary and Shelley.
So the 2 things that I did that I think really helped me get my first board seat were increasing my brand visibility and network mapping. So I had attended a seminar with someone in the PR world was talking about, and they looked at the research that said that within 12 months of your public, like doing something, being in an article, winning an award, or doing something, people land their first board seat. And so, for those of us that are sort of behind the scene type people and never out there, think about opportunities where you can be a thought leader, write articles, be on panels, do things that increase your brand visibility on LinkedIn and other places, so that when people look for you or Google you and they see you are the, thought leader in this space, it's going to be helpful for you. And the second thing is network mapping. And that exercise is, it's literally, you get a spreadsheet and you write down every single person that what their industry, what company, and you go call every single person and you let them know, I'm interested in this. This is my experience. How can you, do you have something? And if you don't, who can you introduce me to? And it's a long, lengthy exercise. But that opened up so many doors for me. And I ultimately got my board seat. I think it was like 3 connections down. Someone introduced me to a female board member. Female board members tend to be overboarded, so they get opportunities. So she then recommended me to another board member that recommended me to a board recruiter. And I never would have met this board recruiter had I not said, I am looking for a board seat. I know exactly what you're looking for, know the stage and the industry and all the things, but I am looking for X, and put it out there and connect with these people, because it's literally still is like who around the table when there's an open board seat. And people just go around, who do you know? And recruiters are, who do we know? And so if you are not in that network, it's not going to land to you. So it's a really important exercise.
Great, thank you. And Mary?
I guess like 3 quick things. One was, it is a journey, and it takes maybe a lot longer than it would to find like a day job. So I spent 3 years almost full time looking for a board seat, and there was probably no guarantee that I would have even gotten it after 3 years, but I did everything. And to Trisha's point, like 15 years ago is when I attended the Northwestern Women Corporate Directors Program. And this woman was not a CEO, but she was a senior executive, I think, at Microsoft. And she said that how she ended up getting on her board was she started telling everyone, because if people don't know you want to be on a board, they can't help you. She sent out hundreds of emails, but personalized emails to different people. And I took that to heart. And I've sent out hundreds of emails, and you really need to do that. And then thirdly, I think if you're not fitting into a category like a CEO or CFO that normally fits into board, you need to spend time on translating your skills into what boards are looking for. So like, for instance, I was meeting with a friend who's a general counsel at a university. And so I think a lot of boards would say, oh, well, she's in the educational space. She's not even in corporate America. But the university itself runs some businesses that she helps oversee. So she need to think beyond her GC role about what skills and work she's doing.
Great. And last but not least, Shelley. If
Yeah,
everyone's okay, we have 2 minutes, right?
yep. I would say relationships, which is one reason I like networks like Fourth Effect, and another reason why I started Schmooze. Every board, I've been on 6 boards, I'm on 2 now, but every board role I've found has been through relationship. I've talked to recruiters, I've interviewed with them, I send my board bio, my CV, etc. Every one of them has been through relationships. So once I realized that this was an interesting opportunity, I started being more intentional. I'm shy and I'm an introvert. So this stuff does not come naturally to me, which is why once Jimmy Lee knew my name, I never took advantage of it, because it's like, oh, I don't know what to talk to him about. But this last board situation, one of the guys went to University of Alabama. I'm a football fan, not a fan of Alabama, but he and I talked college football for probably about 15 minutes. Even though friends had recommended me, I'm sure if I didn't connect with him on some level, he could have vetoed me and they would have gone back to the drawing board. So relationships, even reach back. People who I haven't talked to in 10 years will reach out to me. I don't mind at all. Because I just feel it's relationship. As somebody said to me, it's relationship karma. A woman I interviewed recently for the Schmooze newsletter, relationship karma. If I help somebody, that'll come back to me, some way or another. So don't be afraid. People seem to always be thrilled to hear from you, and I'm always thrilled to hear from people. So for me, the key has been relationships. And remember that this is not easy. It is. People said to me when I first started, when I got on my first board, oh, you're a Black woman, people will be knocking down your door. That has not happened at all. I've gotten some stuff through relationships, but it's not like I'm fending off offers right and left, like tennis balls, like, woo, woo, woo. No, that has not happened at all. And so what I would say is be prepared. Like Mary said, this is a journey. It's almost like a full-time job. And so be prepared, and then don't take it personally, and be prepared to be the only one in the room when you land the spot. And so then those relationships with the other directors are really important, because not only do you need them to get stuff done, but those are the people who will refer you to your next board.
Perfect.
Great advice.
Right on time. Thank you so much.